She left him 3 weeks before the wedding, packed a bag, walked out the door, and went to be with the man she said was just a friend. 3 months later, she came back thinner, exhausted, eyes red from crying, and discovered he hadn't waited. CS, entend.
She left me 3 weeks before our wedding for her best friend. He gave her HIV, and she came begging back. I'm not someone who falls fast. 7 years with Laura wasn't something that happened by accident. It was built slowly, deliberately, the way you build anything you actually intend to last. We met in a college class neither of us wanted to be in. That detail always made me laugh. Two people who would have rather been anywhere else, ending up exactly where they needed to be. We weren't dramatic. We weren't volatile. We were stable, the kind of couple that doesn't generate stories because nothing goes wrong. For a long time, I thought that was the best thing we had going for us. The proposal wasn't spontaneous. I thought about it for months. Chose a small restaurant we'd gone to in our first year together. Nothing elaborate, no crowd watching, no staged moment. Just us. A real conversation, and a question that already felt answered before I asked it. Laura said yes the way she did most things. Calm, certain, like it was simply the next logical step. I interpreted that as maturity, as certainty. For the next year, we organized everything. The venue, the menu, the guest list, the 10,000 details that turn a wedding from an idea into an event. Our families were involved. Our friends assumed everything was fine. I assumed everything was fine. But there was something I'd been rationalizing for years without fully realizing it. Something I'd filed under, not a real concern every time it surfaced. Daniel. Laura had known him long before she knew me. She talked about him the way people talk about someone who's been woven into their foundation, someone who showed up during the hard years, who understood her in a specific way she couldn't quite describe. I never had a problem with it. I'm not a jealous person by nature. And for years, Daniel never did anything that justified suspicion. He came to gatherings, joined group plans, was friendly and respectful. At some point, he stopped being Laura's friend and became part of our extended circle. But there were small things I chose not to examine. The way her voice shifted slightly when he was around, not dramatically, just softer, a different register. The way she laughed at things he said. The messages she answered almost immediately when his name appeared on her screen. The conversations that paused when I walked into the room. None of it alone meant anything. Together, it meant something I wasn't ready to name, so I rationalized, told myself that 7 years of friendship naturally produced that kind of closeness, that if something had been there, it would have happened already. That was my mistake. Thinking time eliminates possibilities. Sometimes it just hides them.
He wasn't blind. He was choosing comfort over clarity. There's a difference, and it only matters when the thing you avoided finally arrives.
3 weeks before the wedding, everything was at peak intensity. Final confirmations, last-minute adjustments, vendors calling with questions that felt urgent at the time. The stress was expected. The other thing wasn't. Laura started changing. Not dramatically, nothing that would register as an alarm on any ordinary day. She seemed more tired, quieter, further away from conversations even when she was sitting right next to me. The first time it really landed was an evening at home. We'd ordered food because neither of us had energy to cook. The TV was on, but neither of us was watching. It used to be comfortable, that kind of silence. That night it wasn't. She barely touched her food, kept checking her phone like she was waiting for something specific. I tried to start conversations. She answered in short, automatic sentences. Eventually I asked her directly if everything was okay. She paused, not a natural pause. A calculated one. Yeah, just tired, she said. I didn't fully believe her. I also didn't push. The days after didn't improve. She spent more time away from home. Supplier meetings, family errands, last-minute wedding tasks, nothing that sounded alarming on its own, but the discomfort kept building without anything concrete to attach it to. There was something in how she said it, like she was defending a position I hadn't actually challenged. That was the first moment something shifted from vague unease to actual signal. 2 days later, I came home earlier than expected. A meeting ended ahead of schedule, and I didn't think to announce it, just came back. Laura wasn't alone. Daniel was there. They weren't doing anything obvious, just sitting in the living room, talking, but the atmosphere was wrong. There was a specific quality to the silence that fell when I walked in, the kind of silence that only exists when a conversation was already somewhere it shouldn't have been. I greeted him the way I always did, he answered, but his discomfort was readable. Laura avoided my eyes for a few seconds. What are you two talking about? The wedding, she said. I didn't ask more, but something had already changed in me, something quiet and irreversible. That night, after Daniel left, the apartment felt heavy in a way I couldn't shake. I waited until it became impossible to ignore. Is there something you want to tell me? I kept my voice even. No accusations. Just space for her to say something true. She shook her head almost immediately. No, everything's fine. Are you imagining things? The answer came too fast, too prepared. Less than 2 weeks before the wedding, Laura asked to talk, not casually. The way she said it had weight, like she'd been carrying the sentence around for days and had finally decided to put it down. We sat in the living room, She didn't turn on the TV, didn't try to soften the moment. She sat across from me with her hands folded in her lap, looking at the floor. The silence that followed was long. "I think we should postpone the wedding." I didn't respond immediately. I let the words settle into something real before I tried to react to them. "Why?" She hesitated, took a breath. Daniel had told her he was in love with her. I sat with that for a moment. Not just the information, the context, the timing. 3 weeks out, after a year of planning, after 7 years of building something I thought was solid. And what does that have to do with us? That's when she started to cry. Not dramatically, just enough to make clear she was genuinely affected. "He's always been there," she said. "He knows me better than anyone." I waited for her to say more, but what she said instead was the thing that actually mattered. "Do you have feelings for him?" The silence that followed was longer than any answer she could have given. "I don't know," she said finally. 2 words. That was enough. The conversation shifted after that. We weren't talking about logistics anymore. We were talking about everything underneath them. I told her it didn't make sense to postpone a wedding because of someone else's confession, unless that confession had changed something inside her. She said she needed time. Time to understand what she felt. Time to not make a mistake. Would marrying me be a mistake? She didn't answer. That silence was clearer than anything she'd said out loud. The conversation that followed wasn't explosive. No screaming, no breaking things. Just a slow, grinding tension, me trying to apply logic to something that had already moved past logic, her retreating further into a position I couldn't argue her out of. Then she said the thing that closed it. "I need distance," she said. "Not just emotional. I'm going to stay with Dano for a while." 1 beat of absolute silence. "How long?" "A few months." It wasn't a suggestion. It was already decided. She tried to frame it, said it wasn't what it looked like, that she just needed clarity, that she had to understand whether what we had was truly right. But the reality was plain. She was leaving. She was going to him. "If you go," I said, "I don't know if I'll be here when you come back." She nodded. "I understand." That was what hit hardest. Not the decision itself, the ease with which she accepted losing me. If you've ever had someone accept your absence without fighting for a single second, you already know what that does to a person.
She didn't leave in confusion. She left with a destination already in mind. The "I don't know" wasn't uncertainty. It was an answer she wasn't ready to say directly.
She left 2 days later, packed what she needed, left some things behind, walked out without a meaningful goodbye. No promises, no agreed timeline, just a pause that had no defined end. I stood in an apartment full of objects that no longer meant the same thing. A year of wedding planning reduced to a series of calls I had to make. Contracts I had to cancel, deposits I wasn't getting back. Canceling a wedding 3 weeks out is not a simple process. Most payments were non-refundable. Vendors had locked in dates, turned away other bookings. I negotiated where I could, postponed where that was an option, absorbed the rest. The financial loss was real, but it wasn't the thing that sat heaviest. The first days felt strange in a specific way, not sadness exactly, more like a kind of blankness, like everything had moved too fast for the emotional response to keep up. Then the blankness started filling in. Frustration, anger, questions that didn't have clean answers. And underneath all of it, slowly, quietly, something else. Distance. I started adjusting my routines. Small changes at first, new paths to work, different places for coffee, removing certain contact points that were just reminders. The shape of my days began to shift. That's when I met Clara. She worked in the same company, different department. I'd seen her before in the hallway, at all-hands meetings, in the cafeteria. We'd exchanged brief greetings, nothing more. The first real conversation happened at the coffee machine. She made a comment about how bad the office coffee was, casual, throw away, not meant to start anything. I responded almost automatically, but the conversation didn't end there. It ran a few minutes longer than either of us planned. A few days later, we ran into each other again, then again. Each time a little longer, a little more natural. Clara was direct. She didn't perform interest or manufacture warmth. She just said what she meant and listened when you spoke. That simplicity registered in a way I wasn't expecting. At some point, she asked about my personal situation. I didn't give her everything, just the essential. Recently canceled wedding. Relationship ended, still processing. She didn't offer sympathy or follow-up questions. She just listened. That was worth more than she knew. We started getting coffee after work. Occasionally at first, then more regularly. It wasn't impulsive. I wasn't trying to replace anything. I just didn't want to stay still. With Clara, nothing was weighted down by history. No accumulated expectations. No patterns built over years that had turned into assumptions. Just the present, clean and uncomplicated. For the first time in weeks, that was enough.
He didn't go looking for someone new. He just stopped standing in place. That distinction matters more than it sounds.
The 3 months Laura had mentioned didn't feel like a pause. They felt like a closing. In the first weeks, her absence was constant, a background presence in every room, every quiet moment. Then it started fading. Not dramatically. Not in any single moment, just gradually. The way something loses color over time. I stopped checking my phone for messages from her, stopped running through scenarios, stopped waiting for an explanation that was going to make the timeline make sense. My life was moving in a different direction. With Clara, things developed the way natural things do, without a formal conversation about what we were, without a defined moment where it became official. She started spending evenings at my apartment. We cooked together, watched things, talked about ordinary things without tension underneath them. She became part of the rhythm of my days, no doubt, no second guessing. Just a relationship that worked because both people in it were actually present. When the 3 months were approaching, I wasn't tracking them anymore. That chapter had already closed on its own schedule, not on Laura's. Then the doorbell rang. It was a weekday afternoon. Clara was with me. We'd left work early and stayed in. Nothing unusual. The bell rang once, then again, then a third time, insistent in a way that wasn't casual. I figured it was a neighbor, a delivery, something routine. When I opened the door, I stopped. Laura. She looked entirely different from the woman who had left 3 months ago. Thinner, noticeably. Her face was drawn, with dark circles that spoke of weeks of bad sleep. Her eyes were red, not from crying in the last hour, from something longer, something accumulated. She was holding herself together by a margin that was visibly thin. We looked at each other without speaking for a few seconds. Andres, she said, and started crying, not quietly, the kind of crying that's been held back too long and finally gives way all at once. She moved to step forward. I didn't move to let her in, then after a moment I did. Not because I wanted to hear what she had to say, because she looked like someone who needed to sit down. She walked in and saw Clara. She stopped completely. She didn't ask who she was. She didn't need to. The understanding arrived immediately, and visibly a slight shift in her expression, something closing behind her eyes. Clara didn't move, didn't speak yet, just observed. Laura turned back to me and started talking fast, without clear order, like she was afraid of running out of time before she said what she came to say. I made a mistake. I was an idiot. I didn't know what I was doing. She mentioned Daniel almost immediately. Said he wasn't who she'd thought. That the person she believed she knew had revealed a version of himself she didn't recognize, behaviors she couldn't explain away, things that made her feel uncomfortable in ways she hadn't anticipated, a side of him that had apparently been carefully concealed for years. I didn't interrupt. Not because I wanted the details, because she seemed to need to say them. Then her voice changed, slower, more fragile. I started feeling sick. She described it: gradually persistent fatigue, a cough that wouldn't resolve, a weakness she couldn't attribute to stress alone. She said she got tested, then tested again. Sought a second opinion, waiting for something in the results to contradict itself. Nothing contradicted. She said the word carefully, like it cost her something to form it. Hive. The room went quiet in a specific way, not tense, just completely still. Clara, who had been watching without expression, went motionless. Laura kept going. Said that when she confronted Daniel, he didn't deny it. He'd known for years, had avoided relationships because of it, until at some point he decided that didn't matter anymore. Said there had been someone before her, someone he didn't know well, and that's likely where it came from. That when things started between them, he chose not to say anything. His words, according to Laura, he saw it as a kind of last chance. An opportunity to have something normal without thinking about consequences. When I confronted him, she said, he didn't even really apologize, said it wasn't a big deal, that the sex hadn't really mattered. Her voice broke on that last sentence. The silence that followed had a different weight than any silence before it. Laura looked at me directly. I lost everything, she said. I lost you. I left something real for something that turned out to be nothing, and now she didn't finish. I have nowhere to go, she added. I need help. I want to come back. There it was, plain, direct, unambiguous. I looked at her for a long moment. No anger, no satisfaction, no impulse to explain or justify, just a clarity that had been building for 3 months without me fully recognizing it. No, I said. Laura blinked, like the word hadn't fully registered. Andres, please. I shook my head slightly. There's nothing to come back to, I said. What we had ended when you made that choice. She tried to interrupt. I kept going, same tone. This wasn't an impulse. It wasn't something that happened in a moment you couldn't control. You chose to leave. You chose to risk everything we had. She started to say something about confusion, about the state she'd been in, about human error. The words were real, but they no longer had anywhere to land. I understand you're going through something serious, I said. I genuinely do, but that doesn't change what you did. The silence came back. Laura looked at Clara fully, for the first time since she'd walked in, like the presence of another woman had taken until this moment to become completely real to her. Clara, who had stayed quiet through all of it, finally spoke. Choices have consequences, she said. Her voice was even, not unkind, just clear. You can't leave a relationship, try something else, and expect everything to be waiting exactly where you left it when you come back. Laura started crying again. She tried once more, talked about confusion, about depression, about the kind of mistakes people make when they're not thinking clearly. "You need to go," I said, not harshly, just finally. She didn't argue. Not because she agreed, because she understood that nothing she said was going to move this. She stood there for a few more seconds, waiting for something to change. Nothing changed. She walked to the door, stopped just before she opened it. "I'm sorry," she said. I didn't answer. The door closed. The apartment settled back into silence, but a different silence than the one she'd interrupted. Not heavy, not uncertain, just quiet. Clara came and sat beside me after a moment. Didn't say anything. Didn't need to. For the first time since everything had started, there was nothing left unresolved, no questions pending, no decisions still open, no version of the story I was still waiting to understand. She chose to leave. When she decided to come back, I was already gone, already done.